Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We are in the middle of a homestand. We're also in the middle of crab cake season, and we're getting up on the 4th of July holidays. I want to remind everybody that we're going to be a little respite for the Maryland Crab Cake Tour presented by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. But we are having one final stop at Pappas on Tuesday. We'll be at Pappas in Parkville. Lots of great guests on Tuesday. You'll be hearing that all week long. Some of them who even were my competitors at WBAL for a little while. They think everybody hates me at the competitors. Nah, just the bosses. That's all. John Patty will be with us on Tuesday. Also going to have a whole bunch of other friends and dignitaries stopping by, talking about all sorts of stuff. We reconvene again down at Fadley's on July 12th. We will not be there this Friday, although you can be there, getting a crab cake, get some shrimp salad, a beer before the game, and before Joan Jett squirts everyone. I hope that by the time we get to Friday, they will have won a game. It has been a dry patch here after nothing but water for the Orioles. They can't seem to drink a victory at this point. Luke was at the ballpark on Monday night. They're getting closer, I'd say, and certainly when it comes to hitting the ball, 28 runs in 2 days last weekend and 4 since then, right?
Yeah, I mean, you said getting closer. The pitching wasn't the issue on Monday night. I mean, Cade Povich shook off a rocky start. I thought he was pretty good after the second inning. Gave up the home run to Jose Ramirez, who does that to a lot of people, but he scored 2 runs. I mean, you gotta swing the bats. Heston Kjerstad had 2 of those hits. What was good to see him back in Baltimore, back in the starting lineup, and he had some prosperity, but not very much other than that. And clearly an Orioles team right now that's struggling a little bit. And if you're looking for, as I was kind of thinking about this before we started our conversation, this is also a useful time where you see, okay, what's under the hood for this team? This is really the first time. I mean, first time they've lost 4 in a row all year.
Adley Rutschman hasn't lost 4 in a row ever, right? That's correct, right?
Well, they lost 4 in a row twice last year.
Okay, fair enough. They lost 2 and 2. They didn't lose 2.
Has not lost 5 in a row though.
Fair enough.
A 5-game losing streak you have to go back to right before he was called up back in May of 2022. So
they used to lose 5 in a row a lot.
Yeah. I was there to document and chronicle a lot of it. So, but look, we talked about this a little bit as we were recapping the Houston series. Every team's going to go through some struggles. We know that. The good teams are able to minimize it. The good teams are able to dust themselves off and then immediately start playing well again. The worst thing you want is not worrying about a 4-game losing streak becoming a 10-game losing streak or a 13-game losing streak. I mean, those are pretty extreme examples. What you don't want is a 4-game losing streak to turn into a patch where you've lost 6 of 16, where you've lost, you've gone 3 weeks and you're 7 games under 500 over the course of a 3-week period where it's really extending. It's a prolonged struggle. I mean, last year, keep in mind, they lost 4 in a row last September. Remember, they lost 4 in a row and that coincided with the beginning of that Rays series in mid-September where Tampa Bay pulled into a tie for first place. But the Orioles right after that won 4 straight, won 9 of 12 to clinch the division. Last June and July, I talked about this with you the other day. The Orioles had that stretch where they lost 6 of 7. They went to the Bronx. They had lost, I think, 2 of 3 to Cincinnati prior to that. And they were really scuffling. It looked ugly. So they lose 6 of 7, and then they win 8 in a row and 13 of 16 immediately after that. I mean, that's the mark of a really good team. Not that you're never going to struggle. I mean, again, it's the old adage, every team's going to win 50, every team's going to lose 50, right? But the mark of a really good baseball team is being able to minimize and mitigate those patches that are rough. And this is clearly a rough patch for them. There's no sugarcoating that. As good as everyone was feeling on Thursday night after the blowout in the Bronx, it's been ugly since then. So, and really specifically the last 3 days, it's been the offense just completely going to sleep. So they've got to pull themselves out of it. We talked about this. I talked about this with you as we were waking up bright and early on Monday morning. It's a good Cleveland bullpen. I mean, Bybee was good. Obviously, he's been one of their better starting pitchers, if not, their best. But their bullpen, I said you can't be trailing this team. And they were only trailing them by 1 run, but trailing this team going into the late innings. And that was with Emmanuel Clase unavailable on Monday night. And they still couldn't touch the Cleveland bullpen. So it's a great bullpen, probably the best in baseball. If not the best, it's certainly in the top 2 or 3. So you need to be able to get to the starter. You need to be able to score runs and put together some offensive rallies. The Orioles didn't have a hit after the 3rd inning.
I was going to say, they didn't have a hit after 7 o'clock. You're literally right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they scratched together a couple runs in the first few innings, and like I said,
It was
Heston
good to see
Kjerstad
Kjerstad running around, helmet falling off and hair flying all over the place. And I mean, it looked like home crowd, not a great crowd, but home crowd, home cooking, nice night. Looked like, man, this is the time to hit the ball again. You go 6 innings without hitting the ball at home. That's really unusual for them.
Yeah. I mean, it was, and like I said, I mean, Bibby's a good pitcher. They faced some good pitching over the course of this losing streak. I mean, there's no question about that. I mean, especially the last couple days in Houston, and obviously the opener. But that can't be an excuse. It can be the explanation for a couple days, but you better pull yourself out of it. And that's where I give this team still very much the benefit of the doubt. I mean, even with the 4-game losing streak, 20 games over 500, as we're in the last week of June, they're fine. I mean, even if someone had told you 2 weeks ago they were going to lose 4 straight with the way the Yankees were playing at that point in time, you would have been saying, oh, no, they're going to be 7 games out. They're still fine. But fine, you don't want fine to turn into, oh, no, this is really becoming a prolonged stretch of struggles. So I just got to start swinging the bats again. It sounds simplistic, but they've made it look so easy the last couple years. So that's where I do still have the confidence in this club to pull themselves out of it and start swinging the bats again. Because as I said to you, we've talked so much about the pitching. We've talked about the rotation and the injuries, talked about the bullpen, even before Danny Coulomb has the bone chips removed from his elbow, that I really felt for these next 3-4 weeks, this might be a time where you need to lean on your offense a little more heavily. And even after this 3-game stretch where they've only managed 4 runs, they're still first in baseball in runs scored per game. So it speaks to what their body of work, but you've got to pull yourselves out of it. So, and hopefully Heston Kjerstad does give them a little bit of a spark, and maybe Brandon Hyde shakes up the lineup just a little bit, just to give guys a different look, have guys feeling a little bit differently after.
Well, Urias and McCann were playing on Monday night, right?
Yeah, and look, I mean, we talked a lot about Urias earlier in the year. He's actually swung the bat way better over the last month. He doesn't play every day, but go look at the numbers when he has played. He's actually hit the ball well. McCann, it's tough because Adley Rutschman can't catch every night, shouldn't catch every night. You want his bat in the lineup as the DH. He can't catch every day. I mean, perfect way
Ask
to
Matt
run.
Wieters.
Right. It's funny you mentioned that because we've talked about that in the past, and in the midst of the Orioles not swinging the bats on Monday night, I actually went back to Baseball Reference and looked at the innings that Matt Wieters caught, some of those years, because I was just thinking about that through the lens of how many games has Rutschman been behind the plate this year, and I was comparing it to last year. And April, May, June last year compared to April, May, June this year, yeah, he is catching fewer games. But I think a lot of that had to do with they wanted to see, or I think it was wanting his bat to stay at a certain level. And to do that, you need to try to give him more nights off, at least behind the plate. I mean, a lot of catchers sit entirely. Adley Rutschman rarely sits entirely. And DH isn't as stressful. I understand that. But there has to be a give take there. But the problem is McCann has to swing the bat at a certain level, at least, which he did for the most part last year. Especially after the first couple months, got off to a rough start, but swung the bat fairly well after that. But it's really been a struggle for him. But that being said, you still have a lineup that you've got 9 guys in there. We can point to 1 or 2, but as I said, offense around baseball, most teams, even other great teams, have a couple guys in their lineup at the bottom where they say, oh, yeah, you're not getting much. But it's a factor, and it's more magnified when you have a few days in a row where you're not really swinging the bats. I mean, Jordan Westburg, a couple of solo home runs in Houston, and they scratch a couple runs on Monday, but it's been pretty tough. I mean, 5 hits, and again, none after the 3rd inning on Monday night.
The Rutschman thing's interesting because we are at the end of the month where they've played a whole lot of baseball. Have you ever done a segment with Alan McCallum? I don't think he ever came in and sat on the morning show over your years. I mean, he was my original you. He was you for not as long as you've been you, but he was you for a decade.
Mhm.
Covering the games and being a part of what we did and being a part of the show. He came on 2 weeks ago. He came out and did the show, and we chatted in regard to he always makes a point like I wouldn't have drafted Rutschman. I would have drafted the shortstop, right? And that's worked out great for Kansas City and, son of the player and Bobby Witt and all that stuff. And he said he wouldn't have drafted him. And I always sort of press him like he's a great player. He's like, yeah, well, I saw Waiters and I saw what catchers do. And you can't play him every day. You can't play him every day. Henderson, you
Right.
play him 157 times this year. You give him a couple Thursday games off if you want. He's 22. And that won't affect him when he's 31 or 32 or 33. Catchers are different. And I don't argue with Allen on it. Allen just hits and runs in saying they've done great with their drafts. They've picked guys. They picked the 1-1 that's made it. He's a catcher. Can't play him every day. That's and the Matt Wieters thing, it would be very interesting if Greg Bader had not told Buck Showalter's wife that I'm a bad guy and that I should be avoided for 15 years. Buck Showalter and I would know each other. And if Buck and I were to know each other, I really would ask him if I were to run into him later in life now, say, did you catch Wieters too much? That'd be something I would ask him friend to friend, man to man, and say, what was your philosophy then for that player, special player, catching, switch hitter, all that? And he never really became an offensive weapon. He was a good player, a good hitter. Go look him up. Made a lot of money. I liked Matt. Matt Wieters was actually very nice to me. The one time I met him one time. I had a press pass at Yankee Stadium because the Yankees would defy the Orioles and give me a press pass at Yankee Stadium. And I met Matt Wieters like a week after he came up. I think it was the last time I was might have been the last time I was in an Oriole locker room. So whenever that was. 11, 12, 10, 11. It was a long time ago. It was the new Yankee Stadium, though. I can tell you that. So it was 9, 10, 11, whatever it was. And I don't have an anti-Wieters thing, but I think the body of work for the fan base, for anybody who was paying attention, I was there the night he hit the double and the rainbow came out, the night he came up. I mean, there's a video of it up on YouTube. So I liked Wieters a lot. And I wanted and I prayed for him and hoped for him and hoped that it worked out. And he was a really good player, but never great. And they treated him like a mule. And I don't know who in the organization would have an opinion on that. Brady Anderson's long gone. Lots of guys are gone. It does feel like Elias and Hyde will have a different touch in this. But to your point, the touch is backup catcher's got to be able to play and not just be a rah-rah guy and a good clubhouse dude. When he's in there and we lose a game by a run, you would like to see a double down the line to at least get some pepper started to be in the game. And Allen brings that up on Rutschman. I don't fight with him about it. And I would ask him and he would say the same thing. Like, call me in 5 years and let me know if you like that draft pick. Like call me in 5 years if he's signed, if they give him money. I mean, to some degree, it's so weird it being a new owner in the mind of Rubenstein or getting your arms around new ownership with this and saying, well, we got him and we want him to work out. We want him to hit 320. We want him to play every day. But we don't want to give him $200 million if he turns out to be Johnny Bench, because that's a little bit of that with a lot of the players. Like, give Henderson the money. He's a phenom. I know you love Gunnar. I feel the drip in you. I talk to you every day of my life for baseball. I know you love Gunnar Henderson. If you own the team, where would the money go? And the Rutschman thing is interesting because we're now 3 years into this with knees. He's a college player. He played a little bit there. Where is that? 27, 28, 29? Where is it that he becomes a part-time first baseman or a halftime DH and now he could do that in the National League, that was really not available, in previous generations. But it is an interesting conversation about him when he's out of the lineup and when you use a 1-1 on a catcher that you love. And I'll throw this to you, but I'll leave this. You're like, well, they lost 4 in a row. And the first thing I come up with is, first thing I say isn't Henderson. It isn't Santander. It's Rutschman. He was the rah-rah catcher, the straw that serves the drink, the guy that brings the clubhouse together. He's probably the guy wearing the mop on his head like Frank Robinson doing kangaroo court. I don't know. I don't have a press credential, so I don't get to ask these guys. But like Rutschman's the centerpiece of everything they do, and taking care of him's paramount. I guess that's my long way of Buck Showalter saying of, I don't know if they really took care of Wieters or not, but he didn't go to the Hall of Fame, and we'd like to think that Rutschman is, right? I mean, based on what we've seen, like we'd like to think, how long is this sustainable? 6 years, 8 years, 10 years? Where is it? But it's not the same as Gunnar Henderson, and Allen's right about that. Bobby Witt will
Yeah.
be playing shortstop and making a lot of money when he's 34, 10 years from now. I don't know where Adley Rutschman's going to be 10 years from now, and that does worry me a little bit.
I mean, I don't know if I would say, I don't know if I'd agree with using the word worry, but yeah, I think, when you're talking about a catcher, and keep in mind,
Well, this
these
is a
aren't
big
just
picture value thing of when you take the kid. What do you think's going to happen in his trail?
okay, but
That's all.
understood.
And everything that's happened in his trail has been perfect. So it was for Wieters too when he came up. He was great.
Understood, but we also know that the draft, I mean, we're already talking about it with hindsight. We're already talking about it with information 5 years later, right? So you can only make the decision that is available to you at that point in time. Adley Rutschman was a college catcher who was on the radar for 2 years, had been the best player in the NCAA, had played in the College World Series. Bobby Witt, for as talented as he was and regarded as he was a high school kid. So you have
Like
the
Gunnar.
difference in position.
Right.
You have the difference in a high school player. It's very difficult to project that. And that's why when I hear people scoff at the Ravens drafting, I kind of laugh because you just come across as you don't know what you're talking about. When you
they were laughing when they took John Ogden instead of Lawrence Phillips, and everybody booed when they took Kyle Hamilton 2 years ago after spending $50 million on a safety. Right. They know what they're doing.
But part of that is also acknowledging how this works. The idea is not to get something perfect. The idea is to make a good decision, to make a right decision. You're not always going to make the most optimal decision because so much of it is luck, or so much of it is some semblance of art rather than science.
Well,
something
there's
about
humans involved in this. It's not stratomatic, right?
Exactly. So it should never be, well, okay, well, that player was good, but you could have taken this guy. That's not the standard. The standard is, well, you took a player who stunk, who didn't even make it, who flamed out after 3 years, and not only did you not take that guy, but you also could have taken player A, B, or C, who also would have been better than that guy.
Kerstad was a guy when he had his problems, his health issues. He was a guy that looked like he was going to be Sergio Kindle, right? It was like, it looks like that's far away for him. He slid to second base. Right. One of the few guys got a hit on Monday night. So he was another guy who was special on draft day.
And even that, and again, I'm not, we don't know if he's going to be special or not yet. I mean, it was good to see him do what he did on Monday night, and we'll see how this looks and how the outfield is going to shake out over the next couple of years. I mean, that's going to be a big thing. But even with that, you mentioned Kerstad. That's a perfect example. He contracted myocarditis. That's not, oh, this guy's 20 pounds overweight, or, oh, we did some digging on this kid and he's got a little bit of a drinking problem, or, whatever causes a player not to work out.
Red flag, right?
That was not a red flag that anyone could have foreseen, right? I mean, that was something that in the midst, whether he contracted it because of COVID or what, who knows? But we know COVID was something that caused heart issues in even young people at that, at its height, at its peak with the pandemic. Again, don't know if that's what caused it. Doesn't really matter, right? But it happened, and it's something that happened that derailed his development for a couple of years. And there's something that the Orioles couldn't have foreseen that. I mean, unless you want a team to be a fortune teller, there is going to be a lot of unknowns. So you always just try to make the best decisions that you can. As going back to your original, as we brought up Matt Wieters, I mean, the thing I would say about Adley Rutschman that makes him stand out is he's shown a bat that Matt Wieters, even at the beginning of a season, even in a stretch where he was rested a little bit more, rarely ever showed a bat that really was on the level that we've seen Adley Rutschman at his best. People would talk even early in Matt Wieters' career, but when he was ascending, and look, Matt Wieters was not a bad draft pick. Matt Wieters was an all-star player multiple years. It's if the knock is that he didn't go to the Hall of Fame, well, I mean, it's a really unfair
BJ
standard.
Surhoff a bad draft pick? He played 15 years in the big leagues, played 4 positions, and was a great player. Yeah.
But the thing for me that I would always kind of push back on, year 2, 3, 4 for Matt Wieters, people would talk about, well, he could move to first base eventually. And the thing that I would say at the time was, has he really shown a bat that would justify and warrant moving him to first base at some point in time, right? His bat kind of was good for, not kind of, it was good and at times very good for the catcher position, right? In the same way that we generally evaluate and judge a second baseman's offense differently than a first baseman or a corner outfielder, right? We know positional value. It's why Cal Ripken was such a amazing generational talent.
Why Joe Morgan was the greatest ever, right? Because he hit the ball.
And especially for their position where you have certain positions.
Well, Luis Aparicio would not be a Hall of Famer, even though he's the world's oldest living Hall of Fame. He wouldn't be in the Hall of Fame in the modern era because he didn't hit the ball. He played a different game. The position was different in the 50s and 60s and shortstop. He stole bases, got on base. That's what you were expected to do when you're a little Venezuelan guy playing shortstop. Now you have to be 6'4" and look like Alex Rodriguez to if you're not 6'2", you don't fit the suit. It's like being a quarterback, So positions have changed over the course of history. Catcher hasn't changed in one way. It's really hard. I was a catcher when I was a kid, like putting on the pads, being out there, doing that 7-8 innings a night, even if you get a little help later in the game. And but the backup catcher is where this all started. And the whole conversation is when you have a guy that hits the ball like Mays, you want to play him every day. That's part of the Rutschman when he's not in there and McCann's in there. That's not a half step down. That's 3 steps down. That's not Taylor Teagarden. That's different.
Yeah, and look, there are a lot of teams.
Say Taylor Teagarden. He's pretty much the same player McCann was. Yeah.
Right. I think we've mentioned Taylor Teagarden more times over the years than hits he
actually got. I haven't said Dave
Oriole.
Skaggs enough this week. I haven't, but I just did. So yes.
Well, and look, not to get too nerdy here, but you can almost look at it as a math equation where you say, okay, could I catch Adley Rutschman a little more frequently? Yeah, you could. But you know what that means you probably need to do? You probably need to give him more complete days off than they do right now, which very rarely is he out of the lineup entirely. So at the very least, you're getting his bat in the lineup almost every day. So yeah, you could catch him a little bit more, but then you probably have to give him more full days off over the course of the season to try to offset that. So is that added value better for those nights? So much, is that net gain there? Does that justify the nights where he's not going to be in the lineup at all? And, McCann or whoever your backup catcher is going to be at that point, their bat's still going to be in the lineup those nights. Because again, Adley Rutschman can't play every day. Then, that's where you kind of look at this. That's where I think if you're the Orioles, you're excited about Sam Basayo, who's at Double-A and is 19 years old and absolutely crushes the ball. And, I've heard conflicting opinions over the last couple of years, but the growing sentiment seems to indicate that they think Basayo is going to stay as a catcher. So I don't mean this in terms of what that means long-term for Adley Rutschman or long-term for Basayo.
Are they trading Rutschman?
But three years from now, that might be part of the conversation.
Instead of signing him,
you don't know.
$200 million or trade him and get a young pitcher, trade him away, right?
Right.
I mean, him, right?
You just don't know. You don't know. So, but the point.
Although I do like Adley Rutschman, I don't want them to trade him.
And let me be clear. Me bringing up Basayo is not saying that they're going to do that. Me saying that is in the next year and a half, they might be in a position where they do have 2 catchers that you feel great about their bats, for both of them. So it's up, but at the same time, again, bringing it back full circle to where this team is right now and where they were Monday night specifically. They had regulars in the lineup, guys that you trust and rely on for offense on a nightly basis who didn't get the job done either on Monday night. So
also struck out 13 times too. And I know that's not a problem, but
it's a problem when it's that many.
Yeah.
It's a problem when it's that many. Look, swing and miss is part of the game. We've talked about this. I saw The Athletic this week. They launched a multi-part series talking about state of pitching, what that's meant for offense, just things you've heard me nerd out talking about over and over and over. More velocity, more spin.
The Athletic listens to the show, clearly.
Yeah. They've done a little more groundwork of that. But I said it. Cleveland's got a good pitching staff. This is a good team. The best team in the American League right now, record-wise. As much as the focus has been on the Orioles and the Yankees, Cleveland's just been plugging along. And again, as I said, you can't be trailing them late in the game because they have 5 or 6 guys that have, you know, two or less ERAs. I mean, that's just where they are right
Who do
now with
you
their
love in our
bullpen.
bullpen while we're on this? Because I was going to ask about Povich because we've carried this Adley conversation into not fiction, but into
Yeah.
the reality of why McCann's playing and why he's not and how much they can play
Yeah.
him and how many nights they're off and who's going to hit the ball when he's not in the lineup, right? Because or he was in the lineup as a DH, but who's going to hit the ball when Urias and McCann are at the bottom of the order and Mullins is already more than struggling, but over 200. He cracked Mendoza through all this.
He's been better the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, but the bullpen and pitching and the state of their pitching right
Yeah.
now, the bullpen didn't cost them the game, and I don't even know over the weekend the starters were fine, but they didn't hit the ball. Where are you on Webb, who got banged around the other night? Perez coming in, and the shuttle, the Baker shuttle, and what this is going to be, what's this going to look like when the Yankees get in here 2 weeks from now?
Look, I mean, you've heard me say this all year. This bullpen, statistically speaking, has been way better than just about anyone wants to give it credit for. So I will say this, that for the most part, these guys have gotten the job done when it's mattered. Even Craig Kimbrell, who, as I noted last week during the Yankee series, he's yet to record a save when he's entered with a 1-run lead. But that said, he's done really, really well for most of the season, save those 2 weeks, basically. He's been good and at times has been really good. My problem with the bullpen overall lies in where everyone is basically slotted. I think if you talking about their collection of guys, and I'm not talking about Brian Baker, who's up right now because of an injury and kind of where they are, even though Brian Baker's been used in some high leverage, which kind of speaks to the problem and what I'm getting at here. I think if everyone was slotted down a peg or two in the pecking order, I would like most of these guys. And I do like most of these guys. Most of these guys have done a nice job for them, but I would love to see each of them pitching an inning earlier than where they typically slot in. And I don't mean that means the starter goes fewer innings. That means they would have another arm or two at the back end of the bullpen to basically turn someone who's pitching in the 8th inning to become more of a 7th inning guy. Someone who's been pitching more consistently in the 7th inning suddenly becomes a 6th inning guy. So that's where I am. You mentioned Jacob Webb specifically. Look, I know he had the really bad outing in Houston. In fact, that morning I had written this, but I think you can make a really strong argument, and this might be a damning with praise kind of thing as it pertains to the bullpen, but I think you can make a strong argument that Jacob Webb's been their best reliever. When you kind of look at how they've used him, how they've deployed him, multiple innings, has pitched the 8th and 9th inning on occasion, has pitched the 5th inning on occasion when the starter gets knocked out, it's a tight game, and maybe there's 2 guys on. He's done an effective job stranding runners, much better than Yennier Cano, mind you, as we're kind of comparing guys. So that said, do I trust Jacob Webb to pitch in the 8th inning consistently? No, I don't. I'd like him that much more if he was slotted down a spot or two. And that's why I keep talking about needing to add at least one high leverage arm that I'd love to be able to put right next to Craig Kimbrell and say, these guys are my 9th inning guys, 1 and 1A. I don't need Craig Kimbrell to be masquerade that he's the guy he was 10 years ago, because he's not. That said, that Craig Kimbrell's still good and at times has been really good and has gotten too much grief from fans at times, but that's also acknowledging what he is, which is probably not going to be as reliable in a 1-run game or pitching back-to-back days or pitching 3 or 4 days. So, this is kind of a drawn out answer to what you asked me. I'm not down on the bullpen as far as any individual performance necessarily, as far as the guys who've been here all year. It's feeling that they're all miscast right now. That the idea that someone who's been pitching the 7th inning right now for them a lot, I'd like to see in more of a 6th inning role, or someone who's been pitching the 8th inning, I'd like to see Yennier Cano not have to pitch the 8th inning.
Well, this is where Batista's out,
night.
and you're still sore about that. 11 months later, it's still not really replaced, Batista, to your point, right? Yeah.
I mean, it's tough, right? And look, again, Craig Kimbrell was never going – anyone who ever thought that Craig Kimbrell was going to be
I think
better
they
than
thought
what he's
Kimbrel and
been?
Cano would be the split part of that. If you would have asked him in February and given Elias the saliva test, he would have said, those two guys will handle the ninth inning on and off nights. And then you would say, well, then who's handling the seventh and eighth? And that's where,
I was
right?
just going to
Right. Yeah.
Well, and I was just going to say, if you say that, this goes back to the Jorge Lopez thing 2 years ago when they traded Jorge Lopez, and look, that trade has clearly been justified, right? That trade has been validated in terms of vindicated for all the criticism they may have gotten at the time. But the argument that I pushed back on at that moment in time, people would say, well, Felix Bautista can be the closer. And then I'd say, okay, Felix Bautista is going to pitch the ninth. Who's going to pitch the eighth? You can't clone Felix Bautista, although at times he could pitch 2 innings, and that's why you miss him so much. But the point is, with what you just said, and maybe they did think that. I'm not dismissing that suggestion, but the point was, okay, Craig Kimbrel, like that's one thing for him to replace Felix Bautista, but are you really going to expect Yennier Cano to be better than he was the first half of last year, which was extraordinary, but also not very sustainable when you looked at the peripherals? So again, I don't hate this bullpen, and the numbers bear out that this bullpen's been way better and way more successful than people want to give it credit for. That said, it would be naive to look at that bullpen and not say you need one major upgrade, one major eighth, ninth inning kind of guy that could close games and do that. And especially now with the Coulomb injury, you need someone else that I think at least profiles at worst as a seventh or eighth inning guy. So you need 2 pieces in the bullpen. Long story short, I'm sticking by that. But that said, that doesn't mean I think the rest of the bullpen is trash or anything like that. This team wouldn't be where they've been if not for the fact that their bullpen hasn't been best in baseball by any means, but it certainly has not been this major liability that some would make it out to be at times, just because they're trying to make their point that they want another bullpen or arm or two, which I do too. But again, the rest of that group, they've done a nice job. It's just that I feel that they've largely been miscast, and you're asking guys to do a little more than they're capable of doing, and they've been able to do it for the most part, but that's where you are concerned that that's going to catch up to you as you get deeper into the summer.
Luke Jones, I am old enough to have seen Mike Devereaux and Brady Anderson scale the wall in the outfield. I remember Kenny Lofton made a great catch at Camden Yards. I don't know if we ever seen anything like the one down the right field line in foul territory
right?
The other night. Yeah, I want to get that guy on the show. I got to figure. I got to. He looked a little bit like Kenny Mayne, and Kenny's a buddy of mine, so it's making me want to reach to Kenny and do like a main event shtick with him. Like, how did you catch the ball? And just play along like between two ferns that he actually did it. Because the dude looked a little like Kenny Mayne, but that was uncanny. I'll just say that. Luke Jones will be at the ballpark trying to catch the action on Tuesday night, where I am locked out trying to get in. I'm under review. I've been a bad boy. But we had a homestand here, and Luke is babies are made. Uncle Luke's on the beat. Team's home. Team's fighting for first place. Cleveland's in here looking to beat us up. And then, of course, over the weekend, Luke will be down there for all things Texas Rangers for the getting together with the bad guys from last year. We'll see how that goes for 4 games this weekend. You can find me at Pappas in Parkville on Tuesday. Be there from 2 until 5. May stay a little overtime today. It's going to be a good time. And then on Friday, we will not be at Fadley's, but you can be at Fadley's. We return the Maryland Crab Cake Tour presented by the Maryland Lottery in conjunction with our friends at Jiffy Lube Multicare and Liberty Pure Solutions, giving us clean water. Returns on July 12th. We're going to wait through the 4th of July, eat our corn on the cob, eat our watermelon, shoot off the fireworks, all that good stuff. And then the Yankees are going to come to town before the All-Star break. We'll be down there on Friday the 12th. He is Luke. He is Baltimore Luke. You can find him anywhere the internet travels. You can find me, Ness at BaltimorePositive.com. Lots of great stuff on the air all week. Real proud of the radio station this week with cool stuff, including an exclusive. I haven't been wanting to say that. It's not exclusive. I mean, I don't know who talks to Greg Hawkes from the car. Exclusive interview with Greg Hawkes from the Cars. Saturday night, some Cars music's been in my life this week. So good little music week going on here. Hootie and the Blowfish on Friday night at Hershey. Lots of great stuff out in the audio vault, including Luke's locker room sound as well. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore positive.